Did we do something to deserve this? Is someone guilty of something that we have now received, this virus, this thing that is stalking us? And by we, I mean humanity, not the United States or the United Kingdom or Italy or China, as some people want to blame, calling it the Chinese virus. I understand the inclination. I have it myself. It is so reassuring and comforting to find someone to blame when something goes wrong, when something is bad. If I can do that, if I can assign blame, then I can back up and be righteously angry at that person for the situation we are in, and it's not on me, and I don't have to pay the consequences of it. I don't have to take the lumps. I still can feel the sort of surge of relief that I felt as a kid when Dad would find a tool in the yard, a wrench or pliers or a screwdriver lying there in the grass, and he would pick it up and say, "Who did this? Who left this here so that it could get run over by the lawnmower? Somebody could get killed." And it was so good to be able to truthfully say, "Well, I saw John with that, John, my brother. Wasn't me, so I'm off the hook," right? Yeah. Well, the first question that comes up in the story today is about blame. This man is blind from birth, and so, well, who caused this? Who's at fault here? Who sinned to bring this about? Because bad things result from bad actions. We all know that, right? Yes and no. And so, Jesus does not even go there, if you notice. He says it's not about sin. It's not about blame. It's about the glory of God. Beholding the glory of God. Awakening, opening your eyes and seeing that God is here with us. That's what this is about. That's what this is for. That's what we're here for, to help people see that. That's what I'm here for. That's what this blind man is here for. That's what we are all here for. That's the purpose of this gathering, of this life, in a way. So, Jesus heals the guy, rather succinctly, and in a rather gross fashion. He spits in the dirt, makes some mud, and plasters it on the guy's eyes. It's sort of a gross reenactment in small fashion of the original creation of the human being. God takes some dirt, and there must have been some moisture involved in order to form the human being, so a little rainwater, a little God spit, perhaps, whatever that is, and maybe they're the same, forming this being out of clay, out of dirt, out of mud, and then breathing life into it. And that's the story of how we come to be. Well, Jesus takes this mud, puts it on this guy's eyes as a way for him to begin to enter a new life, for him to become new. And then the breath that he breathes takes the form of words. And what does he say? Go wash in the pool of Siloam, and that Siloam means sent. The man is sent to baptize himself into new life, which is exactly what he does. But before he can do that, before he can see and enter this new life, which is challenging at the outset, before he can do that, he has to hear. He has to listen. The word has to settle into him. And that is a repeating theme in John's gospel, the word taking on flesh. That's important. What follows then is a sadly comical story about a man seeing for the first time and a whole cast of characters around him who either can't or won't join him in that. Right away in the story, there are people who notice him coming back and he's different. And they say, "Man, it looks just like that guy that used to sit over here and beg. He was blind. It looks just like him. He's a spitting image." Ha 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 ha. Thank you. I worked hard on that. Thumbs up. Well, we try. We do the best we can. He's the spitting image of this guy who used to be here, who was blind, who would beg, but it can't be him. Because if it was him, he'd be sitting here blind and begging, because that's who he is. We have established who he is. We know who he is. So as this man, his literal blindness is lifted, and he begins to see with clarity for the first time in his life, the community around him goes into non-seeing mode, into darkness, into this blindness, if you will. And the question that arises for me in this is, am I willing to let that person, whoever that person is, be who God is calling him or her, shaping him or her to become? Am I willing to allow that, receive that, and go with that? It's a question that every parent deals with repeatedly with your child or children. One day, your daughter comes home from school and you realize, this is not the little girl that I sent to school back in September. Something's going on here. Something is changing. What do I do with that? Do I try to get her back in the box that I have for her so she'll be just like me? So he'll be just like me? Or do I allow and celebrate and suffer with this child as he or she grows, and serve as a witness to the fact that God is working in and through her, through him, not only to bring new life for this child, this human being, but to me as well. That is what the neighbors in this community are unable or unwilling to do. It's what the parents themselves are afraid to do. And it's what the authorities, the religious political authorities in the story, are determined to not do. They're so invested in the status quo and keeping things as they are, they won't go there. And in their defense, as a clergy person, I would be sort of in their ranks, Jesus did this thing on the Sabbath, right? This work that he did, considered to be work, so that has to be wrong. And yet, what is the purpose of the Sabbath, if not to give us a chance to step back and take a breath and to see, to look, to find the beauty, the wonder, the work of God all around us and within our own selves? Interestingly enough, this time gives us time to do that. Parenthetically, a couple of observations about the text. When the man born blind is referred to as a man, the Greek word is anthropos. You know, anthropology, the study of humanity. So anthropos could be man, it could also mean humanity as a whole. So it may be that John is saying the man himself is born blind. It may be that John is saying that humanity comes into the world in blindness, and that Christ comes into the world to open our eyes, to give us sight, to turn on the light, to be the light, so that we might see everything in the context of the light of Christ. The other observation is that when this man is being interrogated, asked about who he is, and they say, you're not the man who used to sit here and blind, you're not beg, you're not the blind man. And he says, I am the one. The name of God, I am one. What John may be suggesting is that once you move into that place of deeper sight, you realize you are at one with God, and that all is one in God, and that moves you into a whole new way of being. That's the new life that this man is discovering. Well, the result of the healing is that the blind man sees with increasing clarity not only who he is and who he's becoming, but he sees who Jesus is and what Jesus is about. And so every time he is called on to tell his story again by his interrogators, he becomes more and more convinced of who Jesus is. So that in the last exchange, he is so feisty, he says to his interrogators, why do you ask me these questions? I've already told you. Do you want to become his disciples also? which suggests to us that this man has moved into that category, that he's become a follower of Jesus, which is the last straw. The system won't allow that, so he is rejected. He's run out. It reflects the historical context for John's community at the end of that first century when John is writing around 90, 95. And the rift in the Jewish community, the larger Jewish community, is coming apart and becoming a schism, a separation, a break between them. It's not unlike what we are dealing with and facing in our own denomination, the United Methodist Church, right now, as we wrestle with how we perceive, see, and treat gay, lesbian, transgender, queer people within the ranks of our church. Are we willing, finally, to acknowledge that they are truly children of God, people of God, whom God is shaping and calling into their own being, and to receive them and travel with them, and to ourselves begin to see things differently because of our experience with them? Or are we continue to keep them away, hold them in the background, try to push them back into a closet, lock them up, lock them out? Last Monday, when things weren't shut down yet, but we were moving in that direction, it seems like a long time ago, does it not? I was scheduled to give the opening prayer at the Senate in St. Paul, the state Senate. Ann Rest, Senator Ann Rest, Ann, is one of our parishioners, and she arranges for that to happen. So every spring, this is an annual event, I go and offer the opening prayer for the Senate. Monday was my day to do that. I continue to get lost in the Capitol, going from the parking garage through the tunnels and up into the Senate chamber. I'm doing better. I'm finding my way better. It doesn't take me quite so long, and it's not quite so anxiety-producing that I'm going to be late. I am, however, highly anxious when I get there. Now, that's just our little secret. Nobody needs to know that, okay? This time, I arrived almost a half hour early, which is sort of unheard of. And then the session started a little bit late, so I had extra time. So I was hanging out in the ante-room or the lounge or whatever this chamber is behind the large Senate chamber. And I imagine it at one time being one of those smoke-filled rooms, back rooms where the deals were made and the guys were, wheeling and dealing. Well now, I mean, it's a beautiful room. And it's where people go to have coffee and talk and take phone calls and that sort of thing, just take a break. It's now new, but people were poking fun at each other, and there were jokes, and there was laughter, and it was rather fun. Well, as we're introducing ourselves to each other, the conversation moved to names, and how we spell our names, and how our names indicate where our families came from at one time, way back when, and how we arrived here in the stories of that. And one of the senators from the Iron Range began to talk about the area that he represents, and he said, and I think this is the right number, I think he said that there are 37 different nationalities represented in that particular part of the state that he represents in the Senate. 37 different nationalities over time have come and landed there. And I was thinking about that. What would that mean in terms of languages and dialects and customs and all that went on with that? I mean, it would be crazy, this wonderful, rich diversity, a richness that we now, I think, have come to appreciate and understand most of the time. Well, he then related a story. He was at a regional legislative conference with legislators from other states and talking about all kinds of issues. And in this conversation with this one particular man, the guy was complaining bitterly, angrily, about having to have ballots, print ballots in 2 languages, English and whatever the other language was. And that's wrong, we shouldn't have to do that, we shouldn't have to spend tax money on that, and it's terrible. And this guy listened respectfully, And he kind of chuckled, and then he related the Iron Range richness experience that Minnesota has and that he has come to appreciate. And he said to this man, you know what's going to happen? These people, these new immigrants who are forcing you to print the ballot in their language, they who are working so hard to make their way in this country, their place in this country, their children are going to adapt so well. They're going to speak English better than any of us. That's our story. That's what's going to happen. And he said, you know what happened then? He tells me. That guy got even angrier at what I told him right now. And I thought, well, that is our story. It's the repeated story of humanity, and it's certainly the story of our country. Coming here, languages coming together, figuring each other out, learning how to live together, hopefully. So, why the anger? Could it be that he was angry because he knew he was hearing the truth? And he was seeing what was coming as a result of these immigrants with this new language and how it's going to change everything in his world, and he didn't like it. So he was not going to hear it. He was going to push it away. He was going to be angry about it, and he was going to blame somebody for this wrong thing happening in his world. At the end of the story, the now seeing man is kicked out of the community that he's been raised in. And that's where Jesus seeks him out, finds him, and invites him in. Jesus goes looking for the rejected, for the marginalized, for the unwanted, and in this case, not for the unwashed, but for the washed. It's there that God is found. It's there that God goes. Can we see that now? As this pandemic creates sort of estrangement, as we move apart from each other, as we socially distance ourselves from each other, can we see God with us in new ways? Could it be that this virus is now the proverbial metaphorical mud in our eyes, and that as we're finally able to go and wash it off with all of our washing now, we will come to a place where we see with new clarity that God is our deep connectedness no matter what, always seeking us, always finding us, always holding us together, no matter what. Social distance, spiritual connection in Christ. So be it.